Okay, I think we're ready. Hello, I can see you now. Okay, focusing. Yeah. Yes, we are on a swing today. Something different. Gotta keep it, interesting. We're gonna give this a good go.
This video is made with generous donations from amazing furries, just like you.
When I first started fursuit making, I started in my childhood bedroom at my parents' place, and honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. I had very limited resources and tools to work with back then, and since that time, almost 10 years ago, I've accumulated quite the arsenal of fursuit making tools and an arguably equally large graveyard of destroyed tools. So today I'm going to be sharing with you all of the tools you could need for your fursuit making journey. If you're new here, hi, my name is Sky. I've been a furry and a fursuit maker for almost 10 years now, and I'm here to teach you absolutely everything you could possibly need to know to get started on your fursuit making journey. Welcome to Make a Masterclass. If you're just starting out on this series, be sure to go back and watch the last 5 lessons where I cover everything from the definition of what a fursuit is, to where to buy your furs, to more. Today, I'll be telling you what tools you will need to create your first fursuit creation. I will be dividing these up into 3 categories. The first will be the bare bones basics, which will be the absolute minimum I feel that you would need to create a fursuit from start to finish. Next will be the standard tools, so tools I feel most makers should have in their workspace, and having them would make your life a whole lot easier, but likely your wallet a bit lighter too. And then finally, I will be covering the pro tools over on my Patreon for their extra credit class. These will be things that aren't 100% necessary, but can either boost the quality of your suits or give you quality of life improvements on your fursuit making journey. Here's a brief preview of all the stuff we will be covering, and a link to my Patreon will be down below for that class and all others before it. So whilst you're there, be sure to check out the other rewards I offer. From custom designed fursuit patterns to private tuition classes, I'm sure you'll find something you enjoy. And it helps me offer the main part of this series for free. With that out of the way, let's crack on into it. Bare bones basics. What would one need if, say, they wanted to make a suit but had absolutely nothing? Not a sewing pin or glue stick inside. But they didn't want to buy anything that isn't absolutely necessary. The most economical fursuit making route, so to speak. Most ability for creation with the least money spent. Well, let's start by covering our most basic tools of the trade. As with last video, there will be Amazon affiliate links in the description if you want to help support the channel, but most of this stuff can just be picked up from your local craft store with no issues at all. First up, let's get some scissors. Now, you won't be able to cut your fur without sharp scissors. It is quite a thick fabric. Now, if you're going to be spending a decent amount on anything in this basics list, please let it be scissors. A nice, very sharp pair of sewing scissors will last you a long time, make your work cleaner, and since we won't be including clippers in this first list, it'll make your scissor-based shave work neater too. I'm going to advise you buy 2 pairs. One, a nice expensive pair with a non-serrated edge, and a cheaper pair with or without a serrated edge, doesn't matter, to be your non-fabric work scissors. Generally, a good pair of sewing scissors will usually go you around 50 to 150 Australian dollars, but they can definitely go higher. So buy the nicest pair you can afford. For your non-fabric pair, just a decent $30 or even less will do you fine. These are the ones that you'll essentially bully a bunch and use it to cut anything that isn't fabric or thread. Now that we've got something to cut our fur, we need something to sew it together with. So let's have a look at sewing needles. There's a few types of sewing needles I recommend you get, but often you can find them like all together in a pack for about $5. Nothing really too expensive here. The first kind I really cannot recommend any higher are curved needles. These are not just nice to use, but are really useful for getting inside strange places like the ears or in between fingers, like literally a lifesaver. To that, I also recommend a thicker sewing needle with a decent amount of length on it, and a thin needle with a bit of length on it too, for thick fabric work and more detailed work respectively. Avoid shorter, thin needles as you might lose them in your fur, so I always try to aim for the longer ones so they don't get lost. Happens more than you think. And be sure to have duplicates of each. Well, we've sewn our fur, so how are we going to attach it to our foam base? Or build a foam base for that matter? We gotta go get a glue gun. If you're only planning on making one suit, a cheap one from your local craft store is completely fine. I prefer using high temp guns with a little sticky outy nose bit to help get in hard to reach places. High temp will cool more sturdily than low temp. It can withstand heat and washing a lot easier when you're working with low temp glue guns. They're designed to melt at lower temperature than hot melt glue guns. So if you were to leave a suit made of low temp glue in a hot car, for example, it's more likely to kind of disintegrate than it is with higher temp. So those 3 things are usually the first things you need to create your fursuit, but there's other things I recommend you grab so you don't have to do 1,000,001 craft store trips. A good slicker brush is a must-have for all new makers. These are dog grooming brushes with wire bristles. They are for brushing your suit, and specifically brushing fur out of seams that may get caught when you're sewing it together. Aim for the slicker brushes with the angled metal bristles and try to avoid any of the little plastic dot things on the end. Anybody who tells you that those kind, like the non-plastic ends are gonna rip your fur out has not actually tested it and sat there and brushed the same piece of fur for like 20 minutes. You're fine. I just find that the plastic dots on the end just don't get all of the mats out towards the back. You can even buy these for super cheap at pet stores or even discount stores. Next up is pens. So we're gonna get Sharpies and paint pens. They are my go-to for tracing foam and fabrics for my suits. When you're choosing Sharpies to buy, make sure you only go for black or silver. The other colors are not waterproof and can leak through your suits if you're not careful. Paint pens are also a great option to go for black or darker fabrics, but only buy the white ones if you're going to go this route. But you can also use white pencils, Taylor's chalk, or even chalk pen. Paintbrushes. Paintbrushes are for, well, painting things. You gotta paint your eye mesh with something after all. And not much else to say about this, although the foam paintbrushes you can buy are really good for this too. Just a decent set of paintbrushes will work fine. Measuring tape for measuring and sizing things. A cheap one is fine. Sewing pins. Even if you're hand sewing everything, sewing pins can help keep everything together while you work. The extra long ones, like floristry pins, are usually my favorite, but really any will do. I'd recommend avoiding the ones with the super tiny metal pin heads and nothing else, as they can get lost really easily. A hat stand. A simple styrofoam mannequin head or a hat stand will help a lot with making your head and keeping things the right shape as you work. Just something to bulk out your bucket head base will make your life a lot easier. Nothing expensive for this basic tier, just something quick and cheap around the same head size as you will work, around the same head size as you will work fine. Face mask. Not like we don't have lots of these left over from COVID and now or anything, but wearing a face mask, especially when shaving, will keep all the microplastic dust out of your lungs. If you need more convincing to wear a mask, Google groomer's lung and get back to me. Vacuum. Self-explanatory. Have you ever had 4 huskies collectively shed their winter undercoats in a confined space over the course of a day or so? Well, you're about to discover what that's like when you start working with furs. It's a vacuum to clean up. You can already see the nightmare that's behind. You need a vac, trust me on that. And I think that's all the basic stuff you need. To clarify, this is the absolute bare minimum, like 0 bells or whistles, nothing. But if you're keen to make your life a little bit easier and save your carpal tunnel perhaps, let's move on to the standard tool. These are tools that I think would complete the things needed to create multiple fursuits with ease. They require a bit more of an investment, but in my opinion, it's so worth it. Let's start with the most obvious one. Sewing machine. This wasn't included in the basics, as in theory you could sew an entire suit by hand, and there's some makers out there who do, but most of us prefer to use machine for ease, wrist health, and durability's sake. So what sewing machine do I recommend? If you're going to be making suits super casually, then a low-end machine that has a heavy-duty label on it will suit you fine. Often cheaper machines without the heavy-duty label won't have the motor strength to sew through thick fur fabrics with ease, and it can be a fist fight to get it working the way you want it to. Now, before I put in my recommendations for machines that will last you longer, a quick note on that heavy-duty thing. There's a reason I'm putting it in quotation marks. A lot of machines marked heavy duty are designed for sewing thicker fabrics. They have stronger motors than other machines, say in the same line, but it is not, however, designed for heavy industrial use. Stronger motor does not equal stronger durability, and fursuit making tends to abuse poor sewing machines quite a bit. If you're looking to make a purchase of a machine that's going to last you several years, at least, go to your local sewing machine store and find a secondhand machine. For real. Older machines that feel really heavy are often my go-to. You see this machine here? $15 from Lifeline, which is an op shop or a thrift store for you Americans, and it works brilliantly. Chat to the workers at your local store, or even chat to a repair technician about what they'd recommend. My personal recommendation is the Janome Memory Craft line. They often have fancy stitches or even embroidery machine settings, and honestly, they have lasted me years longer than any Schminger heavy-duty machines ever have. A domestic machine, if taken care of, will last you many, many years. If you're really going hard, talk to your local store about semi-industrial machines for something with a little bit more oomph behind it. With that done, let's move on to the next pricey purchase, clippers. Another one I didn't include in basics, as you could technically do an entire shave job with scissors with enough patience. Now, I will say a nice pair of clippers will make your life infinitely more easier when it comes to shaving your fur. I would recommend a couple of guidelines when it comes to choosing what clippers to purchase. Number one, go with known and reputable brands. Wahl is personally my go-to for clippers, but there are other brands like Andis and others that are just as good, I'm sure. What I'm saying is don't go for nameless and cheap and nasty clippers. They won't last long and won't cut very cleanly if they cut at all. Number two, buy a base that allows you to change the blades. Those weird like clipper guard comb bits never really made much sense to me. It might just be my experience, but I find they don't shave as clean as separate blades for different lengths. It also means when your blades go blunt, you don't have to replace the whole clipper unit, just the blade. For my shaves, I mainly go with a 10 blade and a 7 FC blade. The larger number, the shorter the fur. And FC stands for finishing cut, which I think means it just finishes up cleaner. I honestly still have no idea. I also have this little clipper here that has a blade that allows you to change the length with this little toggle thing at the bottom. It goes slightly longer than a 10, all the way down to a fair bit shorter than a 10 blade, almost like a 30. It's cordless and I've been enjoying it a lot so far, but my standard fare is a Wahl KM 2-speed. They're pretty beefy and on the affordable end of things, so I recommend them. They're pretty good. Number three, keep your blades well maintained. Oil and clean those bad boys very often. Sharper blades make for cleaner shaves. And these things are not built for fake fur, they're built for dog fur. Different texture, and it means that the blades will go blunter quicker. So be sure to keep them maintained and even take them to get professionally sharpened if you do not want to buy a new pair. Electric knife. You've likely seen in my videos, I use an electric knife to carve my foams. This is just an electric bread knife. You can buy them fairly cheaply from home appliance stores. I recommend the bread ones over the meat ones. I don't know, they've always just cut nicer for me. I'm not really sure what the difference is either, but you know, it saves your hand strain when cutting out thicker pieces of foam too. An X-Acto blade. A good craft knife will help with all sorts of things, from removing tape patterns to cutting out iframes. Honestly, it's just a generally useful tool all round. Hair dryer, likely something you already have at home. A hair dryer is useful for fixing fur that is running the wrong direction and generally giving fur that has been aged or maybe crinkled during transit some new life. Think of it like a little Fursuit spa treatment. Heat up an area and brush. That's it. Ed head. You've likely seen this dude in my videos before. This is Steve-O. He is an armature head, and specifically he is an Ed head from a company called Monster Makers. He is designed to be proportionately accurate head and shoulders, basically. These guys will go you around $100 to $200 and are extremely durable. You really only need to buy one for pretty much your entire career. I've only ever needed one. Maybe I'll get a second one for fun, who knows? But they are very useful for checking the fits of heads to make sure it's all sitting comfortably, and for patterning necks as well. Respirator. Just one step up from the face mask, and if you're using clippers, you can make some pretty fine dust out of that, so you want to keep it out of your lungs. So a nice respirator with replaceable filters will keep that groomer's lung away. Generally around the $50 mark from your local hardware store. Rack. A cheap, adjustable height clothing rack is super useful for hanging duct tape dummies up and makes checking shapes of padding and patterning all that much easier. I'm sure you could source one cheaply from a thrift store, or IKEA sells them for about $25 dues. Sewing clips, the newest trend in fabric holding technology. Sewing clips are great for holding your pattern pieces together, for sewing them with your machine, and they remove any risk of being stabbed with pointy metal. I've seen these things vary from super cheap to obscenely expensive for plastic, so have a shop around. I'll try and put a decent value set in the description for you all. Stencils. A set of circular stencils of varying sizes is a godsend for tracing eye pupils to the right size. I prefer the thinnest plastic ones I can find to make it easier to apply paint cleanly to the edges. Shouldn't cost you more than $5 for one of those. And I think that's just about it for the standard tools you'll need to get started in fursuit making. If you're keen on going all the way, be sure to check out my Patreon, where I'll be covering the pro tools that you will need to take your fursuit making to the next level. And be sure to check out the other rewards I offer whilst you're there. Link will be down below. Did I miss anything? I think I just about got everything, but do let me know down below. And be sure to subscribe to be notified of our next lesson and hit that bell icon. Our next lesson will be covering fursuit maker lingo, so it should be a really fun one. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next lesson. Bye now.